Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are. I'm Jim Bojo. Welcome to Going Critical. This week we're looking into the extraordinary story of the Philadelphia experiment. That's a report from October 1943 of the US Navy trying to make a warship disappear. Joining us around the table is our usual panel of creators, as well as a special guest. So thank you one and all for coming, and it just remains for me to introduce the team. So for those of you who follow his work already, you'll know that unfortunately Zapostate cannot join us this week. Our best wishes go out to him, and with a bit of luck, he'll be back before you know it. So for those of you who don't know him, I can recommend you check out the link in the description. His channel, he's just done a brilliant 2-part video where he takes down the claims of S.J. Thomason. Definitely worth a look. As for the rest of the team, let's find out who's here. First of all, Carissa Brock. Hello, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing okay.
Excellent. Have you got anything new you wanted to tell people about? You got any new videos out, or have you seen anything that you think people should check out?
No, I don't have mine out yet. I'm still working on mine. Unfortunately, holidays and kids and work have made it to where I haven't had a chance to sit down and actually start recording. But I do want to give a big shout out to you guys and to Marvel Girl for helping me with the script and stuff. So hopefully that will be out in the next couple of weeks. And pretty much everything on everybody's site. Just go shill the hell out of everybody, because I've been catching up on a lot of people's videos, and there's some amazing stuff out there.
Oh, well said. Absolutely. No, that's brilliant indeed. And I look forward to seeing whatever it is that you've got coming out as well. And as you say, Marvel Girl, brilliant shout out there too. Let's see, next on the list, we've got Anthony Bailey. Hello, Squire. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing
Hello,
pretty
buddy.
well.
Brilliant stuff. You got anything coming out?
No.
You got anything new coming out? Nothing new, no?
No.
Oh, never mind. Well, how about anything you've seen this week? You seen any new content that you want a chance to shell out? I know you've got a new creator, but I've seen a few interesting things happening. Nothing to update on?
Oh. No, I'll mention next week another one, but yeah, I have the one this week.
Okay, well, in which case, we'll just have to look forward to your new creator in a moment. Just for the meantime, then, let's talk to Robert Leger III, pushing the buttons and listening for the bells and whistles. How are you doing, buddy?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing grand, thank you. How's your week been? You've been a bit less busy, haven't you?
I've been, excuse me, I've been every bit as busy as I have been, only I've managed it better.
Ah, nice. Okay, working smarter, not harder. Excellent. You got any content out, or have you seen anything you want to tell people about lately? I know there's been one or two sort of charity streams that have been worth looking at, and isn't there something you wanted retweeting?
Yeah, I have no new content for my own coming out. Like I said, I've been too busy working and all that, but we do have several things to mention. We are currently trying to raise money for They and Them, who is a big pillar in the back end of this community, and he's had some rough times financially due to some family emergencies. So we'll be putting the links in the chat for anybody who can. Please consider donating, or at the very least sharing the information to others so others can possibly have a chance to do the same. Also on that front, Conspiracy Cats has agreed to donate a portion of his channel proceeds should a certain tweet be retweeted enough times. So we'll also share that link. And he's also donating his Teespring proceeds for the next month to the cause. And he'll have a 30% discount code for the holidays included in that for everybody. So if you want your cats merchandise, now's the time to do it. Thank you.
What a brilliant shill. Absolutely. And what a gent that guy is for giving away some of his sort of proceeds like that. I think that's a brilliant thing for him to do.
Yeah, he was more than generous, and he's always incredible.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. Well, look, last on the panel, we've got Paul Ponky. Hello, mate. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm okay.
Brilliant stuff. Now, you've got some videos out this week, haven't you? And you've got some stuff coming out. Have you got anything you want to shill for?
Some videos. I've got one video. I'm a little bit lazy. So 1 minute of footage a week is all I've got. But if I were to show anything, it would be exactly what Robert just said. The They and Them fundraiser that's important. He's a pillar in the community. We need to do what we can to help him out in his time of need.
Indeed. Well said. Okay, well, I think moving swiftly on, obviously, in case you've forgotten, I'm Jim Bojo. I talk to people and my cat debunks flirts. There may or may be not another video coming in sometime in the near future, so do keep your eyes peeled, and with a bit of luck, he'll be back on your screens in no time. Right, time for our special guest now. It's sort of unbelievable he's even agreed to come on the show, really, but being the gentleman that he is, he's agreed to have a chat with us about the subject, presumably because he has some experience being a Navy man, and many of you will know him from his weekly Veterans Talks. He's also responsible for Canar with Damar, although I'll have to tell me if I've pronounced that wrong. If you haven't guessed who I'm talking about already, frankly, where the hell have you been? It's 82 Productions. Hello there, mate. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, and actually, yeah, you got that one spot on the nose there. Good on you, bud.
Well, I'm a bit of a Trekkie myself, so I hoped I'd got that right. Well, look,
Be a problem
just
if
on
you
the
didn't.
weird. Well, look, in case anyone in the audience doesn't know who you are, I can't honestly believe that's the case, but just, for the sake of due process, perhaps you could tell people listening, who roughly, in your own words, who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I definitely think the best way to explain people what I do is, yes, I am a Navy veteran, and to put it kindly, I bludgeon the willfully stupid with facts, predominantly about history and the sciences. I have been a curious SOB for as long as I can remember. And it really has driven me to be a true skeptic where I don't take things at face value. I will listen to people who will be like, okay, that's nice, but what do you have to support your stance? Like, what do you have to actually back what you're saying? And then go from there and make my own decisions from that. And that's where I ended up in a lot of the STEM fields and everything. And always had a fascination with both the Navy and specifically naval aircraft. So what do you think I had to do leaving high school? Of course, I'm going to sign away the best years of my life to go be a modern day pirate. Just remember, everyone, you can't spell a good beer without an R.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Oh, well, look, that says it all, doesn't it, really? Now, my sort of awareness of you in the community turned up pretty much as soon as I sort of started moving into the flat earth stuff. So for the last couple of years, it was the big names from the original, what you like to call Team Cunt, is you've got people like Red's Rhetoric, Sean Hufford, yourself, GeoStreamer, Microbloganism, all these old names, people who in the last sort of 5 to 7 years have brought up the sort of people like Geronism and that. You sort of been at constant war with them. Now, how long is it exactly you've been in the community, and what was it that made you start sort of making content and appearing around the place?
Oh, so with me on that end, it for those who don't know, the whole flat Earth topic really kicked off about 5 years ago now on YouTube, and it was in that time frame that there were a couple of channels who were open debate channels. So back when Hangouts on Air was really a thing where you could easily connect and get people onto a panel to talk about whatever you wanted.
Oh man, the good old days.
Yeah, and I initially came across Flat Earth Discussions and Flat Earth Debates, that paired set of channels. And at first I was like, wait a minute, Flat Earth? This has got to be a joke. This has got to be a fucking joke. So I go in and I listen and I interact in the actual text chat a little bit until eventually I end up on a panel and just try to figure out why are these people trying to say what it is. Is there anything actually to what they're talking about? I gave them a chance, and they fell flat on their face.
Every single time. Yeah, I know what you mean. I came into the community with a genuine sense of, look, I'm just going to talk to these people, and if they're honest with me about it, we should be able to come to some conclusions. And it didn't take long for me to realize that they don't have any real arguments at all. People like Spurs Chemo, for instance, are just... Anyway, look, before we get lost down this mad rabbit hole...
My favorite skid, Mark. You just had to go down that one.
Right, that guy. Oh my god, I've had many an entertaining hour in the 24/7 Discord just shouting down the line at him. Look, at this point, normally this is what I call the shill moment. This is where you get to say, look, I've got a video out, or you guys should go and look at this creator. So is there anyone that you want to tell the people about who you think, look, go and check this out?
Well, I'm assuming the majority of people watching right now are already subscribed to 1 Minute Debunk, because I will say I've been subscribed to him for a while and took a look at his subscriber count earlier in the week and noticed he was still only hovering just north of that 500 mark. So I'm curious, Port Punky, how much of a bump have you seen since I actually mentioned you when I was on with Steve McRae a few days ago?
Oh, that was a rush of about 20 or so, I think, which is pretty good. Like, my channel is really bad for the algorithm. The algorithm loves 10 plus minutes. 10 to 15 minutes is like a real sweet spot, or much longer content. So 1 minute, the algorithm really doesn't like it. So I rarely see...
It's amazing as well, because you have such great content. I know I've said this to you before, but the 1 minute debunk format is genius. How does no one else... No, isn't it though? In the space of like 72 to 75 seconds, you can take any number of obviously ridiculous claims and just go, this is why you're wrong. Boom. Like, I've been addicted. I think I joined your channel at about 70 or 80 subs. Maybe pushing the 100 mark, and I said at the time when you came onto the shills before, when I was on that, I said, oh, you're going to be on tens of thousands before long. I can't understand why this isn't the sort of channel everyone would be subbed to, because as soon as a new video comes out, bang, you can watch it, you can have a laugh, it's perfect. I just don't... Sorry mate, anyway, I'll stop blowing smoke up your ass now.
I don't know what to say. It's the algorithm. My channel is not algorithm friendly, which is fine. I knew that from the start, but I'll keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. All right, well, look, thank you very much indeed for that. I think it's probably time that we sort of move on now. Let's see. I'd like to remind the audience to check out the link in the description for 82 Productions YouTube channel. I mean, if you're not attached to it already, I don't know why. Get over there and have a look. He's got some brilliant content. He's appeared across numerous channels. Let's see, I've said all this stuff already. The problem is, you've answered these questions so thoroughly that half of the stuff I've written down is now completely redundant. So I just tell everyone that if you've got any questions or comments, at Port Punky, he's going to be our chat monkey today. He's going to get the questions to us and respond to things, so make sure you do that. Also, if you've got any corrections... Say again? Sorry, mate.
At Going Critical.
At Going Critical, my mistake, sorry. Absolutely, thank you. And also, of course, if you've got any other comments, you can email the Going Critical Show at gmail.com. Let's see. First of all, corrections. Now, let's see. Last week, I incorrectly described the nature of a black hole's evaporation. Correctly, it should be described as increasing the rate of its evaporation as it decreases in size. So thank you to Robert Adset and Janie, who's one of our brilliant mods, for spotting that. If you've got any more corrections regarding this show, don't forget to get them sent to us. Lastly, I'm going to turn to Tony now, because you've got a new creator for us this week. What have you got for us?
Yes, first off, I have to make a correction of my own. Last week, I said that Captain Phobos was at 89 subs. That was incorrect at the time. He was hovering around 26. But now he's at 36, and if that's some of you, thanks a lot. That's what this corner is for. Today, I'd like to present a creator that's been around for a bit, but receives, in my opinion, not very much attention. She goes by the moniker Southern Hemisphere Globehead. She lives in Southern Hemisphere, of course, in Africa to be more exact. She's pretty much flat Earth centric, and gives her own thoughts on how flat Earthers are wrong. She presents her own observations, very good time-lapse videos of sun movements. In any case, give her a look, and if you like what she does, maybe even a sub. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Tony. That is fantastic. Now, look, Bobby, I think we've got a video lined up that shows a little bit of her work, don't we?
We have.
Brilliant stuff. Well, I'll leave you to cue that one up now, then, if that's all right.
Ready to go.
So I just want to start off by saying thank you to all you guys who give my videos a view. It's what keeps me doing what I'm doing, in addition to showcasing the Southern Hemisphere. So today is extremely hot and very windy. It is cloudy, but the clouds are not helping. We are 39 degrees Celsius today. So I've got the fan going on in the background. If you can hear it, I'm so sorry. But it is just simply too hot. So, you guys know how flat earthers accuse us of being trolls? I thought that a troll was someone who knows something as a fact, but attacks someone who holds exactly that same point. Am I right, or am I misunderstanding what a troll is? Because when it comes to flat earthers, we are definitely not trolls. Because I don't usually like to give my opinions on these types of topics, because usually my opinions don't go with like the mainstream consensus. And when I give my opinions, I usually ruffle a lot of feathers because I don't go with the flow. I have a different way of thinking, but please note that these are my opinions based on how I see the world working around me. I'm going to wrap up my thoughts about the Big Bang and speak about a few other things. So, in order for us to accept the scientific method, which is the most accurate way we have to finding the closest thing to a fact of reality, we have to accept that we don't know all the answers. And also, we have to accept that we may never know all the answers. Well, certainly not in our lifetimes. Maybe sometime in the future, some of the answers might be, derived, but we may never know all the answers.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, look, that gives you a rough idea what she sort of does work out. I think next we're going to see... oh, crikey, I've lost my place. There we go. Right, finally. Sorry, I got so completely thrown. I was completely enthralled by that video, and then suddenly it stopped, and I thought, Christ, I'm supposed to be doing something now. Look, obviously it's a great video, so go over to her channel and sub now. Have a look at what she's doing, because like me and Tony particularly have been watching her for a while. It's another one of these channels. We're slightly surprised she isn't doing a lot better. So if you want, get in the description. We'll make sure that link is there. If it's not there right now, it will be by the end of the show. And you can check her out for yourself. Right, that's housekeeping over. So I'm going to pass this over to Port Punky now. He's going to give us an introduction, finally, about what we're actually talking about today. So, Port Punky, what have you got for us, buddy?
Oh, well, before the intro, I want to announce a little game that I'm going to play with the audience. Bobby, can you bring up the first image?
I can.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to play a game called Let's Play Absolute Nonsense. During this episode, we have added in a few red herrings, a few bits of information that are complete nonsense, and not the kind of nonsense that we normally look at, but homebrewed, straight-up nonsense. The first person in the chat to say absolute nonsense will get, I don't know, I don't really think it's true, 10 points, let's say. And if you say absolute nonsense when it's really stuff that people are actually out there saying, then you lose 1,000 points. The scoring system might need work.
Yes, answering this is quite detrimental to your health.
Okay, maybe just lose 1,000th of 1 point.
Okay.
So feel free. Oh God, we've already got called on it. Absolute nonsense. Oh geez. Right, yeah, you get the idea. So at some point there will be absolute red herrings thrown in. See if you can spot them. Okay, now that that's over with, let's get on to the actual topic at hand. Bobby, if you could bring up the next image.
Sure thing.
Okay, here's a map, and there's Philadelphia, because it's always kind of good to know where things are on the globe. October 1943. In an effort to gain an advantage during the war, the US military conducts an experiment in Philadelphia. A destroyer escort named the USS Elridge, next image, was fitted with top secret military technology intended to render the ship invisible to radar. The technology accidentally made the ship invisible completely, teleported it, pushed it backwards and or forwards through time, and perhaps even put it within the grasp of alien intelligence. The ship is returned, the surviving crew are sworn to secrecy, and the whole incident is classified and forgotten. But with so many witnesses, it was only a matter of time before word started to spread. What really happened to the USS Elridge? Today's topic is the Philadelphia experiment.
That was absolutely amazing. Sorry, I was gripped the whole way through. What happened? How did it happen? It's incredible. Now, look, I'd like to start off by pointing out that there is a film. Now, we've got a couple of clips from it that I believe Bobby has got in our media folder. It's the video, and I want to play that before we go anywhere at all so that you can see exactly how this was represented in film. Now, it's a terrible film, an awful film, really, really dreadful. But it is actually strangely accurate in the sort of representation of what's supposed to be happening. So we're going to play this video and probably chatter over the top of it because there's no sound on it at all. And Port Ponky, you can probably help describe what's going on and how it relates to the actual claims.
All right, starting it up.
Beautiful.
I have no idea what I'm about to see. I'm excited. I've seen the movie. Oh, yep. Dramatization may not have happened. Yeah, he's turning that switch. That's the experiment switch. That's the spinny thing. Most experiments.
That's the generator. Absolutely.
Yeah. They have things spinning.
Yeah,
Here's that guy. Oh, and that guy. They both got speaking roles. That's good. They'll get a paycheck.
yeah.
Okay, that is a scientist drunk with power, obviously. He's the guy who's going to be doing the experiment. And look at all those valves. Wow.
Yeah. It's a good thing they put the two youngest and most attractive actors in the most important roles.
Oh,
absolutely.
Always. And now you always want to make sure that your valves are glowing when you're doing something with them. Because that's totally not an indication that they're broken.
No, not
My
even
own concern. They're just sort of lounging around like, hey, look at that. I guess that's unusual. Probably fine.
Well, now, I mean, there's going to be a short stretch where what we basically see is people looking at radar screens.
What could go wrong?
I don't know if you... did you notice the ship start to glow ethereal, sort of bright green rays of light?
Yeah.
I like the idea that the stealth technology that they're working on to make the ship disappear, before it disappears, initially it makes it glow really, really brightly and draw massive attention to itself. There we go.
Like
it's on screen now.
If they're looking at their radar screens, they won't spot it, but if they look out the window, it's going to be...
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, guys, I totally boned that. I'm sorry.
You know what? It's more or less doesn't matter. That pretty much showed everything on. There's about another 30 seconds, and then you see the ship fade from view like a cheap After Effects special effect. So, you know.
Whilst the people at the docks continue to lounge around, almost like it was edited in post.
Well, to be fair, it was a movie done in the 80s. They didn't exactly have the best visual effects to use. But even then, here's a question. If that was what actually happened, how did they account for the still displacement of water?
Well, now this is interesting. I assume this is a budget problem because the actual original sort of report, which we'll get onto in a moment, I suppose, did claim that the ship completely disappeared and the only thing remaining was the outline of the hull in the water. So, like, basically, you would still see the water, a hole the size and shape of the ship moving around on the surface. So it kind of give the game away as to your location a little bit. And presumably, if you look just along the surface, you'd see all of the froth and the spray that you'd expect to see from a ship. It's not like the best stealth technology I've ever come across, if I'm honest. I think this is probably a good point to sort of move on to the history of the thing, right? Because we've got a few different ways to look at this. Obviously, Port Punky's given you a rough idea of when it was supposed to have happened, but what was the point, do we think, that this appeared in pop culture? When did it first start to bubble up out of the woodwork? I'm going to turn to Anthony Bailey, first of all, and perhaps he can talk to us about what he's found out.
Well, the first reference to such a thing was in 1956. What? What's going on?
Oh my God. Good Lord. Tony, are you there? He's disappeared in a green fog. Unbelievable. I think someone better call NASA. Extraordinary. Well, look, I'd better move swiftly onwards. Let's turn to Port Punky and see what he's found out about where this originated.
Hold up. I have this non-disclosure agreement for everyone to sign first. No one saw anything.
I'm hoping that he'll reappear mysteriously in a little bit as if nothing happened. Let's just hope for the best, shall we? Port Punky, what have you found out about the history of this?
The history of this is actually pretty well documented. You can actually find out where the claims came from, who the players were, and the sort of timeline of how it all came about. I think it starts with a gentleman named Morris K. Jessup.
Right, absolutely.
Or am I skipping ahead? There's a few more images. I got images for all of this stuff.
Well, I suppose so. Look, before we sort of go into the history of it, then I think there was one sort of part of the claims that we talked about that didn't get brought up that I really wanted to, which is about the disappearing sailors in the bar. Do we remember this bit?
There's an image for that.
Oh, is it all right? So let's put up the next image.
Next image.
Well,
Tony's back.
Anthony's back. What happened?
You are not going to believe this.
Oh my God! Tony's back. You're in the future. What did you see?
They're drilling oil in Antarctica because the ice cap melted, and so there's a lot of land open. And yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh man. So is it a nightmarish hellscape?
Skyscraper islands.
Oh my God, this is incredible. You need to write a book and send it to a pulp fiction magazine so that they can report it.
I'm gonna make money from this.
Absolutely. I think you could start a religion, man. Well, look, I think we've had a mystery of our own. Let's see, where the hell were we? I've lost position. Okay, the image, yeah. That's a bit of fun.
This is a claim that is associated with it. When the ship came back, crewmen were melded into the bulkheads and had all sorts of problems. There's no actual photographs of it, so I took a photo from Star Trek where the same thing happened, which shows you the caliber of this claim, perhaps.
I mean, this is a transporter accident, right? So it's the same exact thing. It's a teleportation incident.
Oh, that's not a transport accident. That was caused by the nebula.
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yep.
Ah, my mistake.
Jared, maybe
Gotta love those multiphasic nebula. You never know what's going to happen when you go through and hit a subspace distortion. You might get sucked through a bulkhead or the deck plate like that, or you just might go into a hyper-aging state. Although you got to be careful when you reach for a piece of fruit in that instance.
Oh, that episode. I remember that moment.
I'm not going to Star Trek, but I think that's the one with the Romulan one. This is from the one. This is a different one.
Oh, I know, but similar effects.
It's a similar thing. Yeah, it's just so dangerous in space and in Philadelphia.
Clearly.
I mean, Philadelphia is so dangerous that most of their sports venues have their own jail.
Wow, that says a lot.
This is true. This is true.
Now, look, there's just one more claim that I want to examine. Bobby, do you mind skipping to the next image for me?
Next image.
Yes, please. There you go. It's a bar. Now, what is this? Punky, I think I'll let you describe this for me.
So a few days or weeks after the incident, some sailors were in a bar chatting about their secret technology, and they got into a bit of fisticuffs. And to the surprise of onlookers, they vanished into thin air, just straight up evaporated. And here's a photo of invisible sailors in a bar. They might be fighting. We don't know. They're invisible.
Absolutely. This might be just before you see all of the tables and chairs fly in different directions, so could be anything. I think we're at the point where we've pretty much covered all of the initial sort of claims. We've got a ship. It supposedly disappears. In some claims, it reappears hundreds of miles later. There's also stories about sailors disappearing, reappearing, and doing all sorts of odd teleporty style things. There's even a claim about them being sent forward to 1985 in Montauk Bay, where they were doing some other sort of secret military experiments. So I don't know if anyone thinks I've missed anything out in terms of the original sort of conspiracy claims, where that all from. But what I want to do now is find out where this all came from. Because for me, it starts in 1955, right? Now, this is with a chap called Jessup. Does anyone recognize that name? How about you, Tony? Do you know who this is?
Yeah, he was attempting to be a science fiction writer. He started writing under that, what was the name of the book again? Yeah. Anyway, he was trying to write stories about UFOs, and one of his books came back to him by a Carlos Carlos Allende. You know, exactly. And he's a lot of writing on the edges and stuff. So he sent that to the Navy.
Okay. Well, now look, I'd like to turn to our guest at this moment. I'm wondering, because you didn't have a huge amount of time to research this. We sort of spoke to you quite late in the day, and it's fairly impressive you managed to do anything at all. But I wondered if there's anything up to this point that you're thinking it hasn't been mentioned or you'd like to bring out.
Well, for the history of where it came from and everything, I think you kind of have to remember that when it comes with Jessup, he had already authored a book where he had already started going away from sci-fi as a fiction writer, to where his book that he published in 55 was titled The Case for the UFO. So he was already getting into that. There's more here going on than there actually is. Now, how much of that was him just trying to get a marketing ploy to get some notoriety and sell some books, and how much of it did he actually believe, never really came out. And just an interesting aside of this, it's fascinating that you went to the first movie of the franchise for some of those visuals, because my introduction to this particular topic in general was actually the sequel. And
I see. Okay.
And as a kid, I saw that. I was like, hey, that's actually a pretty nifty premise for a movie, for a story. And then I started to find out, oh no, it's a sequel to this one. And I was like, wait a minute. And then this was right in the early days of the internet, when it was still all dial-up and bulletin board systems. I ended up finding a lot of places still talking about it and still trying to come up with some sort of justification and explanation for it. So, yeah,
absolutely.
This topic has a personal touch, because it really is the first conspiracy that I ever looked into.
Oh, nice. See, that's brilliant. Now, actually, it's funny you should say that, because one of the things that's come up during the week as we've been researching this is a few of the sources for some of our research, particularly some documentaries. There was one in particular. It was about 2 hours long. It had Korean subtitles, and I do not know where the hell it came from. They had American-sounding accents, but it could have been Canadian. Who knows? The point is, though, during the course of this 2 hours, the Philadelphia experiment was linked to every conspiracy you could possibly think of that was doing the rounds in about 1999 to 2000. Everything from moon hoax, JFK, Roswell, like Aurora-style jets. God, what else? I mean, literally anything you could name. It was like the conspiracy handbook at the time. And I think that's maybe why like a few people have come across it before, is because it's attached to everything. If you've been sort of looking into any conspiracy-based stuff, you're going to turn up to this. And it's a good one because there are sort of kernels of truth to this story, whereas a lot of the conspiracies we've been looking at are completely baseless. Flat Earth would be a perfect example of people just being abhorrently wrong. In this instance, there was something that did happen in Philadelphia. Now, we'll probably get on towards the conclusions later on that, but I'm going to do a quick run through of some of the images right now just to get some of them crossed out of the way. First of all, could we go to the next image, please, Bobby?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm going to turn to Port Punky for this one. I want you to tell the ladies and gentlemen what penguins have to do with the Philadelphia experiment.
As Jared will probably know, it's customary for the captain to keep a pet on the ship, often a cat, to help with rats and stuff. But the captain of the USS Eldridge had a pet penguin. And this was recovered after the experiment and tested by animal psychologists. It found to have gained advanced language abilities, telekinesis, and so on.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, that's, you know, as we know, there have been some extraordinary claims attached, and this is just another one of those. Now, let's see, what's next in our little list of images?
I think Turquoise Laura has spotted.
Do you think? I didn't take long.
It didn't take long. Yes, this is nonsense.
I mean, that was seconds, wasn't it? About 7 seconds. She's straight in it. That's bollocks.
Hey, she's on it.
There's nothing to
She's sharp.
Next image.
Next image. Good
So
try, though.
Turquoise Laura has 10 points.
Yeah, congratulations, Turquoise Laura. Super top secret. This just demonstrates the level of how hardcore this is. Now, look, the next two images are what we've just been talking about, right? So the next one first is Morris Jessup, right? Morris K. Jessup. Let's have a look at him.
Next image, right?
Oh, yes, please.
Yep.
Gotcha.
There he is.
There he is. There he
And
is.
this is the book. And the next image is the book that he wrote. So if we can skip straight onto that one as well. There we go. This is the case. Absolutely, it is indeed the Barrow edition. Now, as Tony mentioned, this was sort of sent back. So this was sent back to Morris Jessup, filled with notes. Carissa, I'm wondering whether or not you know a little bit about what happened there, because as Tony mentioned, this was a chap called Carlos Allende. Now, if we skip to the next image, we'll see a picture of him. And Carissa, perhaps you can tell us a bit about him.
Yeah, actually, according to multiple sources, his name was actually Carl Allen. The book that they found that was sent to them had 3 different colored inks, 3 different handwritings, with multiple notes on different things that didn't just mention UFOs, but also mentioned the Philadelphia experiment. If I remember correctly, Carl had stated he had been one of the witnesses, and I can't remember which part he witnessed. But when Jessup found out about the notes, he explained to who it got sent to. I think it got sent to a military person, I think. And he explained to them that was not part of his original book, and then that there was like this huge resurgence of everybody being interested in it, and it blowing up. And then Carl Allen came out and said, "No, that's actually me." And
Sure.
There was a whole lot of nonsense involved with what he was doing.
Well, indeed. I mean, and that was, so I understand it.
Can't even
I think
remember
this
half
is
of
right.
what I watched.
Well, now, am I right in thinking that he initially had a lot of these claims, and then he came out at some point and said, actually, this was a hoax. But then, when there was a resurgence in interest in the topic, he then said, actually, no, it wasn't a hoax. I was telling the truth the whole time. Is that right? Or have I confused that with something else?
No, I think that's right.
I On you go, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's what he did.
This
Because
is kind of-
he
I'll mute myself. I'm sorry.
No, Port Ponky, what was it you were trying to say as well? So was there something important you wanted to cut in with? Did we get something wrong?
So the Carl Allen stuff kind of comes after Jessup, because Jessup sadly committed suicide.
Okay.
Shortly after. Well, he pegged it. Yeah. So the annotated edition with the different colored inks and the kind of weird notes about the Philadelphia experiment was republished as the Varro edition, which is the picture we saw previous. But they only printed about 100 copies, which, due to the rarity of the Varro edition and the fact that Jessup pegged it by suicide, that I think added a lot of fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Well, didn't the Navy also take all the copies and lock them down?
Maybe.
Wow, that's a fascinating fact that I missed. Is that true? I'm relying on you to get that because I didn't spot that part.
So, well, it's not so much that the Navy had tried to lock it down. It was interesting because a couple years after the first version of the book was written and its limited publishing, the Office of Naval Research actually did contact Jessup, and the ONR did fund a production run of the book. So it was one of those where there was a bit of involvement in it because there's enough actual fact in Jessup's book about what took place to warrant it actually being kept as a reference. Granted, a lot of the first-hand experiences of what was visually observed and everything, where it goes over the top or written off, but some of the tellings of some of the results that happened internal to the ship when they were testing the apparatus, there was a failure to it. What happened wasn't what they were expecting, but it was nothing like what was written in the book. There wasn't the time travel, there wasn't the massive invisibility, but as we get later, we can go more into the specifics of what actually took place and what can actually be verified with the reporting. And also, guess what? We still kind of do this thing today.
Yes, well, don't give the game away just yet, but you're absolutely right, of course. This is it, indeed. Now, look, I want to cover just a couple of points before we move on, because we've discussed sort of, obviously, the 1955 book and the fact that the chap had received letters originally. And then, of course, as you said, I actually had a note on that as well, which was that the ONR received some, let's see, they'd received their own annotated version of the letter, which said something like, "Happy Easter, enjoy." And it had a conversational style thing written supposedly between various people. It was concluded that it was probably all Allende's, but it was just another sort of part of the many layers of this confusing thing that went on. And as Paul Ponky pointed out, when he then committed suicide, this whole confusing arrangement of events served to make it look a little bit sort of suspicious. Now, in 63 and in 78, a couple... Oh, sorry, Bobby, what was that, mate?
Oh, no, I was saying it made it seem a little dodgy at that point.
Yes, slightly. And I suppose what the problem then is that because it's mentioned in print a couple of times afterwards, as I say, one in 63 and one in 78, in 1979, a chap called Charles Berlitz really popularized the idea. Now, let's see, if I turn to Tony Bailey once again, do you know who this chap is, Charles Berlitz? Because I think he might be the next image that we've got as well. Bobby, perhaps if you jump onto that one.
No,
There he
I hadn't seen anything about Berlitz. Well, wait.
No?
There was something.
Well, now, he wrote a book about the Bermuda Triangle. It's actually a subject we covered before.
Right.
Yeah, Flight 17.
Right, Flight 19.
Yeah, exactly.
The one we talked about. Yeah, it was
Flight
amazing.
19, right. where there's a little thing about that too. That
Mhm.
supposedly had the same kind of stuff. Well, not really. So a miniaturized version, but it was supposedly too big to go into the torpedo bay, so they had to leave out a pilot, or not a pilot, but a passenger. So they had to put it in a passenger place. Whereas, a passenger is what in the Air Force around 6 feet tall. And if
Yeah.
you take that he's sitting, the sitting place is probably maybe 4 feet with the cupola,
Yeah,
and a little
that's a
bit
good working
smaller.
estimate.
I believe a 9 foot torpedo would have provided more space.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, actually, no, you're right. There's this brilliant thing that it was claimed that basically because one of the flight members didn't go out on that flight, that's the entire basis for the conspiracy, that he didn't go on because they needed his seat in order to put the equipment in, which they just mounted to planes. And again, it's linked to something very slightly true, which is sort of the basis for where all of this expands from is something that had been tried on both planes and on ships. But the link between Flight 19 and this is much more tenuous. I think it comes from Charles Burlett's book where he connects. It is a book of the paranormal. It had aliens, it had mysteries, it had the Bermuda Triangle, it had the Philadelphia Experiment. It was one of those sort of books. Port Punky, perhaps you could tell us a bit about it.
No, I didn't really look into Burlett's too much because I know he was very popular. He wrote the Bermuda Triangle book, and he wrote this something to do with the Philadelphia Experiment, but I didn't read it. I read
look,
a big chunk of the Varro edition of the Case for UFOs. It was silly, so I gave up on reading forever after that.
Fair enough. All right, well, look, in that case, let's move swiftly onwards to the next image. Who have we got now? I've got... Oh, okay, this is Carl Weathers. This is a good one. Let's see. How about Tony Bailey? What has Carl Weathers got to do with the Philadelphia Experiment?
Well, it said that he had attempted to reignite the Philadelphia Experiment. Claiming it was a fact.
Oh, okay. So he was like the basis of a re-emergence of the conspiracy theory, then, right?
Yeah, pretty much like that.
Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the chap who played Apollo Creed. He was also in Predator. He's got a fairly impressive...
Hold up.
Yeah?
He's also Chubbs from Happy Gilmore.
He is good spot. I like it. That's an excellent reference. Okay, that's just another small detail to add to the puzzle. What's the next image off? Now, look, this one confused me. I'm going to have to turn back to Port Punky for this one because I don't know exactly what this image has to do with the Philadelphia conspiracy. So, let's see the next picture.
I'm going to do this for the chat since nobody else did it. I'm calling absolute nonsense.
do you not think Carl Weathers?
Bobo's got in there just in time. Yeah, Carl Weathers doesn't have anything to do with the Philadelphia Experiment. He's just an actor.
Come on.
I thought we'd snuck one in there. Damn it, Bobby, you got it.
There's a reason why I was staying quiet.
You nailed it. All right, fair play, mate, fair play. Now, look, I genuinely don't know why Greek Playboy is actually in this selection of images, and it is genuinely part of it. So, Port Punky, what's going on here, mate?
Yeah, if you look at the left, you can see it says Philadelphia Experiment, and then
it does
a lot of stuff in Greek. This stream is probably demonetized, but we already dropped a C-bomb, so that's fine.
Yep.
So this was in, I don't know the date, 80,
78 or something, or 80?
They had an article in the Greek Playboy that said, hey, there was a Philadelphia Experiment, and the ship that used to be the USS Elridge was now in Greece, and it's going to get scrapped, I think, and they just did a report on it in Playboy.
I see. This is the link. Because they found the Eldridge in the Greek sort of naval forces under the name of the Leon, I think it was. The Lion, essentially. Is that right?
Yes.
And it was due to be scrapped. And apparently when they found it, they'd lost it, essentially, at some point. They didn't know where it was when they were asked about it, and it ended up in a scrapyard amongst other ships waiting to be cut to pieces.
But Chris Katsolis noticed why is Philadelphia experiment in English?
Yeah, it's interesting they haven't got. That's a good question. I don't know.
Almost like it's photoshopped.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
No, this is not nonsense. This genuinely was a Greek issue of Playboy. No one actually said. No one said it's nonsense. I can't.
No,
believe
nobody called nonsense on this one yet. Oh, Chris Katsolis decided to,
Yeah.
but no, this is real.
No, this is
real.
Playboy issue.
Absolutely. Now, look, I'm going to take a breath at the moment just to see what's going on in the chat in terms of questions or comments. Poor Ponky, was there any questions or comments raised that we haven't had a chance to get to yet?
No, I don't think anyone's done Going Critical for quite a while. Janie said the conspiracy is nonsense, so it's all nonsense. Yes. We're just trying to find our own type of nonsense. But yeah, at Going Critical, I'll read out literally anything that you write. That's not true, but I might.
There was something that I saw scroll past that it wasn't tagged to you, but I definitely think it's worth reading out from the user LRJ88. As if we'll believe an ex-Navy man on this. Well, you're also forgetting I'm in charge of some payroll, so expect to see a deduction in your next check.
Oh, you evil man. Look, I want to turn back to Carissa briefly, if possible, because I have barely spoken to you at all this evening. Where we are at the moment, do you think there's anything sort of dramatic that we've missed out? Because we've looked at a number of the people who've made the claims, some of the things they've said, a little bit of the evidence, I guess, not a huge amount of that yet. But what do you think? Is there something that I haven't brought out?
Well, there were experiments going on in Philadelphia that were attached to the Manhattan experiment. And there was an accident, a couple of accidents, one of which was very severe, that involved 3 men dying of melting deaths after hydrochloric acid burst out of a pipe.
Oh my God!
Oh God!
Yeah, so there were experiments happening in the Philadelphia area that were attached to the war and attached to the Manhattan project, but the ships themselves were not stationed where they said they were stationed. They weren't even in the same port at that time. The U.S. Eldridge was stationed in for the first half of October in Bermuda, and then moved to New York on the last half of October. So it wasn't anywhere close to Philadelphia until towards the last part of October, after this had already happened, supposedly. So there is a chance that there was some cherry picking in some of the stuff that did actually happen in Philadelphia and attached to a ship issue, when in reality it was 3 guys who were dealing with the creation of the atom bomb that caused, they didn't melt into the ship hull, but they did actually, it's because of the acid. So there was a lot of different things I read that said that there may have been some creative license taken and some actual things that happened in order to embellish on a fictional story.
Absolutely. I think you've made the point well there, which is that a lot of the claims, a surprising number of the claims, are not just absolute fabrications. They are all based on things that did happen around a sort of a kernel of truth. So the bar fight where 2 sailors disappeared, that wasn't just completely apropos of nothing. There actually had been a bar fight to which this story is attached. And as you say, you're mentioning this sort of the melting into the ship's deck appears to be an extrapolation of something else. Now, this has come quite important towards the end as we get towards our conclusions. So I think before we move on, we'd better just put up the next couple of images. Bobby, if you would. Okay, now, this is the worst film that I have seen all week.
Wait.
Yeah?
But it says it's one of the best science fiction films of the 80s.
Bobby, don't believe everything you read.
If the list is long enough, it's going to be on it, right?
It says it right there, though.
Yeah, it's in the top 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
for due diligence, me and Poor Ponky both went away and watched this film. I think I'd like to recommend it to people, but I wouldn't expect them to enjoy the film in the conventional sense. Poor Ponky, what do you reckon?
There were some bits that I kind of liked. It had a few bits that were kind of touching on cool sci-fi stuff with sort of portals and wormholes and stuff.
Sure.
It was a bit muddled. I had fun watching it. Like, I watched the whole thing. So
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I could have stopped at any moment, but for all 90 minutes, it kept me wanting to watch each subsequent second.
Well, indeed, I would say it's a really good bad B movie because the premise is sort of a good premise for a film. It's terribly handled, really badly handled, but it's a good premise for a film. And they represent the story of what happened actually surprisingly accurately up to the point where two sailors get sent to the 80s, and it all gets a bit confusing from that point on.
Oh,
But if you're a connoisseur of poor sci-fi films, for instance, if you were at Pete Berube's Sci-Fi Sunday, you will enjoy this film. So yeah, that's my film recommendation for the week. Let's jump onto the next image straight away, shall we? Right. Now, I'm not sure I can pronounce this chap's last name. I think it's Al Bielik or Bielik or Bielik. I'm not really sure. 82 Productions. Do you recognise this chap?
The name kind of sounds familiar, but I don't recognize him by look. And
fair enough.
it is Bielik. And okay, that's right. I'm actually looking through my own notes that I did in a short time. Claimed to be one of the former crew and alleged to be a participant of it.
Absolutely. He's one of our key witnesses, as it were. Now, look, who haven't I spoken to a while? Shall I go back to Tony Bailey? Who is this guy, man?
Yes. Actually, you could say he's the one who made up the premise of the movie.
Yeah.
He said he was there, but his name wasn't Bielik at the time. He had another name, and he was there with his brother. Well, actually, two brothers. One brother was with him in the control room, and the other was out on deck. The name, he said his name was Sugden, something like that. Anyways, and it was pretty much what he said is pretty much the way the movie went off. He and his brother got all scared as shit and jumped off the boat and traveled through time 30 years in the future. And then,
oh my God,
they came back and they seen their brother melded into the bulkheads, and his brother just couldn't stand it and jumped over the side.
You forgot to add the detail that he jumped over the side back into the portal into the future.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
The story is extraordinary. It is, as you say, it's basically what the film is based on. As I understand it, the two that get transported end up going to Montauk Underground Base, where they get told that in the future, the far future of 1985, they've now got time travel and control like all sorts of bizarre things with this amazing technology, because they had, now let's see if I get this right, that basically Einstein had completed unified field theory, that he'd created a sort of a single equation to explain them all, if you like, and thus they could do all sorts of time warping, space warping, mad teleportation experiments, and had insane technology. Is this all ringing a bell? Carissa, do you know what I'm talking about, or am I just gibbering insanely?
I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Sorry about
that. Now I feel like a fool.
Let's see, what was I asking? No, how about you, Poor Ponky? This is, you know a little bit about some of the claims of Al I can't pronounce it. I can't get it right.
Ali B. Call him Ali B.
Ali B. He's traveled to the year 1985. I think he's also traveled to 2174 and 2735 and some other years. He gets about.
Oh, cool.
He gets around.
Yeah, he was there. The Philadelphia experiment. He was there at Montauk Bay. And he will tell everyone all of the details live on stage for money.
Oh, that's convenient of him.
Yes, he's very generous.
Very helpful, isn't he?
So money,
Oh, yeah.
money jogs his memory. I got it.
Yeah.
And his proposed name was Edward Cameron.
Ah, okay. Nice. Thank you. That's
It was
excellent
really worth
detail.
him changing his name if he just went and told everyone his old name. But
Yeah.
I didn't get paid to say that, so don't listen to me.
Exactly.
Right, now
Kinda
let's just
kind of defeats the
quite.
purpose at that point.
Indeed.
You has a great point. Pity he didn't kill Hitler.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, you're too right. What's he doing? Right, let's see.
No, it's because he
I'm a bit
went
lost
forward
now.
in time, not backwards.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That's what these time trumpet tunnels do, isn't it? Now, let's look at the next image quickly, because it's we've already mentioned his name once. So, Bobby, could you just hit the next image up for us?
Next image coming. Albie.
Albert Einstein, the man with the plan. And the next image after that.
We're just gonna blow past Albert like that? Man,
No,
jeez.
we're just going to talk about the
the man.
man. Don't you worry. It's Nikola Tesla. Now, I'm going to turn to our resident mathematician and scientist in chief, because he understands this probably better than the rest of us. Exactly what the conspiracies claim surrounding
Thank you,
Nikola
Jim.
Tesla and... You're quite welcome. Surrounding Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein. Off you go.
Who?
Oh, Bobby. I was talking to Bobby. I want you to know what it is that you know about what the Einstein and Nikola Tesla thing had to do with the Philadelphia experiment. I already touched on it. I just wondered if you'd spotted that at all.
Well, I didn't, but I do know that anything electrical has everything to do with Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, more or less, that's pretty true, isn't it?
He pretty much,
No.
he's pretty much single-handedly responsible for everything we use today electronically. So
Indeed.
that's all I know about that.
Indeed, he did have a bit of a war with Tesla. Now, look, I'm going to turn to our guest then, perhaps, because you know a bit about this. What do you reckon?
Oh yeah. Anytime there is a terrestrial-based technological conspiracy theory, you are guaranteed to hear the name Nikola Tesla at some point in the narrative, and
Absolutely.
that is because, for as brilliant of an engineer and a scientist as Tesla was, he was equally batshit crazy at the end of his life.
What a strange man overall. Like
He was a
He's
hell of a
subjective.
showman.
what he subjected himself to voluntarily, lifestyle-wise, though, is just absolutely insane.
Oh, really? Go ahead. Why don't you just sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Didn't he pretty much eunuch himself? Not physically, but I just OCD.
So he had what today would be a borderline case of OCD. He was very socially inept, to the point, as Fecu has already pointed out, he not just fell in love with a pigeon, he married the pigeon.
Ah, you brought up the pigeon. Excellent. I'm glad you did that. That was because it's a rather defining moment in his life in his later years. Something that sort of signified the fact that the great mind possibly had passed very slightly. Now, as I understand it, despite being one of the most famous electrical engineers of all time, he didn't even really believe that electrons were actually a thing. He was unconvinced about their existence, like, in the end. So clearly he had a sort of a slightly unique approach. I'm sorry to pick on you again, Port Ponky, but I want you to tell us a little bit about the Einstein and Tesla link to the Philadelphia experiment, if that's all right.
So Einstein is usually the one that's pulled in canonically for the unified field theory. There's no real explanation for how that can make a warship invisible or do any of the stuff, but you just slap a big science word and put old Albert E on there, and you're good. But in the later retellings of this, they swap out Einstein for Tesla because, come on, it's a weird electricity-based conspiracy. It's got to be Tesla, right?
Absolutely.
He invented the Tesla car, probably. But there will be someone out there that will say that. Secretly, he invented it in 1903, and Elon Musk dug it up with data.
Is that
Of course.
is that using flat Earth research?
Research.
Right,
Oh,
well, look,
but there
we've-
were electric cars prior to Tesla.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, well, this is a fact that I like about the car is that around the turn of the 19th to 20th century, the sort of early 1900s, there were more electric cars than there were internal combustion engines. Like when the technology was competing to get a foothold over the horses, actually electric cars look like they might be the future. We seem to be going through another period of car design like they did right back at the original, where we're sort of shifting from one gear to another. It should be very exciting. Look, I'm a car guy. I get easily distracted by vehicles. Let's get back on track, shall we?
Definitely.
Well, I was going to say, interestingly enough, on my other channel, AT2 Moto, the Ready for Red event took place at the only museum in the U.S. that actually has one of those early 1900s electric cars on display.
Wow. That's awesome. That's very, very cool. If you go to the Bewley Auto Collection in this country, they've got one of the early ones as well. It's just fascinating and slightly terrifying as well. The battery that they're sort of sat amongst is a gigantic sloshing thing full of heavy acid and big bits of lead. Like a modern lead acid battery for a car, the lead and the acid turn into a kind of foam. But in these old ones, they're just big, baffled sort of metal boxes of terrifying liquid that generate gas and occasionally explode. I mean, it's frightening, really. But then, a car is explosives anyway, so maybe it's not so confusing. Let's see, we've covered pretty much, I think, all of the different angles of this conspiracy. It's been touched with aliens, there's been pulp fiction about it, there's been movies about it. We saw a ship disappear, some cases it traveled hundreds of miles and reappeared back. We're going to start examining those claims now from a sort of a more scientific perspective, but before we do that, we've just got one more image that we want to display. I'm going to turn to Port Ponky one final time to let us know how the final image relates to this story.
Image coming.
Oh, yes. This is the second Philadelphia experiment. They reckoned that the problem with the original ship was because there was too much metal in it, so they used an 18th century galleon called Shatner's Bassoon, and they redid the experiment with this ship, and it all worked fine.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think that's...
Catsolus again.
Catsolus
Thank you.
already.
Okay.
far.
That one was not even remotely believable.
It was worth a go. I like the boldness of it. I like the
But it
audacity
was
of trying.
vastly entertaining, which trumps believable.
Absolutely. Well, look, for those who didn't know already, this is the Black Pearl, right? The ship from the famous movie. You spotted us, you caught us out. Fair enough.
The movie lighting there should have given it away.
Indeed. Now, look, let's look at some of these claims again, because there are actually explanations for a lot of the things that we've spoken about today. I want to start with a nice simple one. The barroom brawl, where a couple of sailors disappeared. Now, I know what happened here, I think. I've sort of been looking into it. Does anyone else want to jump in? Did anyone else see what might have happened with the fighting bar fight?
They had trap doors in the floor.
It's not 100% off the truth. Poor Punky, sorry, mate.
That's almost it. Except the trapdoor's not in the floor, it's just around the back. You see, if you have underage people drinking in a bar and then there's a fight, the police come, the bar is going to get in trouble for that. So they kind of kicked them out the back, and the newspaper said, yeah, they just vanished. Meaning like, they left
They got
the
the hell
area,
out of there,
literally vanished into thin air.
Indeed.
So I guess, Jared, you'll be able to confirm that. I know the drinking age is 21 in the United States. I'm guessing you can join the Navy a bit earlier?
18, I think.
Currently, but yeah, so without parental permission, the age is 18. You could enlist, especially back in World War II, as early as 16, but you did need parental consent. Now, here's the kicker. the drinking age in the U.S. of 21 did not become that until the late 70s. So actually during the 40s and 50s and all until this conspiracy theory really started to take off, you could legally drink at 18.
Indeed.
That's not the reason.
Well, indeed, there's a spanner in the works. But I think that now, as I researched it, the basic story seems to be that in the instance of this particular story, the sailors were described as simply being underage. Now, because it's 1943, as you say, it is entirely possible that they could have either A, lied about their age to join, or B, been under the age of even 18 and still been in the bar having a drink. Because let's face it, if you're in a group of sailors and you've got the uniform on, in 1943, any barmaid's just going to hand you the drink. Let's face it, they were doing it in the 90s when I was a kid, so I can't see it being a problem. The thing that compounds it for me, the detail I want to raise, is that when the barmaid was later asked about those two particular sailors, she said they were never here. It's not just that they disappeared. She said they were never here. And so you've got these contradictory bits of evidence where it says there were 5 and she said there were 3. And where did those 2 disappear to? Ooh, it's a mystery, or just a convenient thing to latch onto if you've got a conspiracy in mind. I think that's covered it. Carissa, what do you think so far? Have we got anything that I've missed, or is there anything that you want to bring up? Because the next thing I want to ask you about is what the experiment actually might have been.
I don't know of anything we've missed so far.
Okay. Well, in which case, do you have an idea about what it is that may have been going on here? Because the Philadelphia Naval Yard, being a naval yard, did have experiments going on in it at the time. And the origin of this Philadelphia experiment story is rooted very much in reality. So what have you got regarding what actually was going on here?
Well, they were trying to make the ships magnetically invisible, so that any like they had magnetic. Oh God, why did my brain have to fail?
Like depth charges, right? Mines.
Right. So they were trying to make it where the ships were magnetically invisible to these torpedoes, so that they wouldn't get hit. Because there was an issue with U-boats being vastly aggressive and overpowered when it came to our ships, and a lot of people were dying and a lot of ships were sinking because of the U-boats. So they had to try and figure out a way to circumvent that.
Sure. Now, look, 82 Productions, as our resident Navy man, perhaps you can speak a little bit to the U-boat problem that was happening in the war at that time.
Oh yeah, especially in 1943, it was still considered what the German Navy called the happy times, where the U-boat wolf packs actually had their greatest successes against the convoys. And where it really was interesting when you look back at it around that time, the east coast of the U.S. was not doing the same thing that you gents over in the UK were at the time, where you were adhering to blackouts and everything so early on. It was not uncommon for a U-boat to be within visual sight of the United States coastline, able to navigate where they are by, okay, here's this city. All right, now we're near this city. Now we're near this city, and actually take out some of the merchant shipping within sight of the port that they had just left.
Oh, man.
And even as far south as the Carolinas, there are reports. There are merchant ships, Liberty ships, that were sunk within a half hour of leaving port, still within sight of the shoreline, and they were taken out. So the threat in wanting to get have that bit of additional protection, not just from the torpedoes that the Germans used, but also their static mines, because they were a magnetic proximity sensor on a majority of them. So it really was. Yeah. It was entirely a defensive thing that they were trying to do. They were trying to limit that signal. And one of the side benefits they thought, in addition to, even though the U.S. and the British had a huge leg up when it came to radio detection, radar systems. Thank you, Brits, for the
Quite
magnetron.
welcome. Well, as I understand it, there were three things. It was the jet engine, the magnetron, and there's one other bit of equipment that I now can't remember off the top of my head. But we'd sort of invented these whilst trying... Say again?
The catapult and the angled flight deck for aircraft carriers.
That was it, absolutely. So we managed to invent these things fighting the Germans, but at this point we were rather beleaguered and we were busy just fighting them off with the RAF. So we handed these secrets over to you, as well as I understand it, our nuclear secrets as well up to that point, what we discovered about fission, and the understanding that if we give you all this stuff, perhaps you'll help us out a bit in the war fighting these bastards off. And you did, and it worked. So I think it was probably a good plan, all in all. There was a detail that I wanted to bring up now, and I've completely forgotten what it was. Damn. Maybe it'll come back to me in a minute. Yeah, go on.
Well, and so with that, so that idea of essentially providing a charge to the hull of a ship, that the hope was that it would interfere with the magnetic detection of those weaponry, and also at the same time interfere with a radar return signal, because the way a radar works is essentially many people are familiar with how sonar and echolocation works. However, instead of using a sound pulse pressure wave to get the return, you're actually using a information encoded radio pulse. It is the radio version of echolocation is how radar works. So if you have it hit an already charged target, you're going, the thought behind it was you're going to diminish that return, which is going to help aid in your countermeasures for detection. If they can't tell where you are, you can operate better.
Now, am I right in thinking that it's something about, especially the equipment they were using at the time, which were, oscilloscope screens, they were looking for reflected signatures because certain parts of the electromagnetic spectrum were going to be absorbed by like metal hulls. And so by looking for that particular signal being returned, it wasn't just that they were looking for some object at some range, because that could easily be confused for rocks or whatever, but it was the specific material it was made out of that they were looking for as well. And by disrupting that signal, it was hoped, as you say, that they could sort of disguise themselves somewhat from U-boat radar. And one small detail I just wanted to raise is that basically we'd been suffering this enormous loss crossing the North Atlantic to the wolf packs. Huge amounts, hundreds of ships a month, sometimes a week. Right, really awful. But, I'm getting a bit of echo back. Oh, no, it's gone. Don't worry. Okay, so yeah, the problem was, as you mentioned, they were these static mines that the Germans invented that were magnetic. And as soon as they started dropping those, my God, the numbers of losses increased dramatically. And that was the point where we invented, or we tried to invent, this technology to sort of disguise that. Now, it's a sort of electromagnetic charge put into the hull, right? Let's go back to Carissa. What is it exactly that they were trying to achieve when they wanted to hide from these mines? What were they doing?
Well, they were trying to make it to where the mines, they were trying to neutralize the magnetic field. I can't remember. It's been a long day.
In terms of what they physically did to the ships, though, was, as far as I understand it, they basically put huge amounts of cables around them. Perhaps if I turn to Tony at this point then, because I think I saw you disappear for a minute. Did you have another future experience?
No, I was trying to prevent one.
Oh, okay, excellent. So, look, what exactly did they do to these ships? What were they trying to achieve?
Well, as we've already talked about, they were attempting to degauss them. This was done because of the magnetic traction. The Eldridge was done. Engstrom was done. There were several other ships also done. And this was the problem with this, as Carissa said, the Eldridge was never in Philadelphia. It was stationed in the Bermudas until 44, and then went to the Pacific Theater. A sailor by the name of Dudgeons came forth and explained all this, which put a pretty big hole in the Philadelphia experiment story. And that was pretty much it.
Well, fair enough. So, look, who haven't I spoken to a while? It's been Port Ponky. We haven't chatted yet. Perhaps you could describe a little bit where it may be that the actual experiments join with the conspiracy theory, especially when it comes to the Eldridge, for instance.
Well, I'm in a good position for this because I'm not a great physicist. And if someone went on my ship and put a bunch of cables in and said it's going to make it invisible to mines, I'd be like, whoa, that's cool. Awesome. Yay. And
Right?
then I might tell someone else, yeah, we put a bunch of experimental cables in and it's invisible. Yay. And, you know, it gets passed on like a telephone. One person to another. Seems fine, right? Except it's nonsense, but it's from a perfectly plausible source.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems to me that the bar fight, which we talked about where the two sailors disappeared, is also attributed to being possibly the original source of confusion anyway, because the fight started around the fact that some guys went in, started bragging about this new technology on their ship that made it invisible, and that somehow started a ruckus with the locals, during which two sailors magically disappeared, which is, you know, all completely explicable, but as evidence seems to be, you know, brilliant fuel for a conspiracy theory. I think we've had a look at pretty much every angle of this pretty clearly. I wonder if I start going around the table and see if anyone thinks that there's something we haven't got to yet. Let's start right at the top of the list. Robert Leger, you watched this from an outside perspective. I know you saw a couple of the documentaries. What do you think so far?
I think this is a huge case of other real world events like usual. Something actually happens and it's stretched into a wild tale, and I don't know. I think we've covered everything.
You don't think that there's any element of this where you're still unconvinced, where you think like, you know what, maybe they did teleport this ship and they have covered it up?
Absolutely not. It's physically impossible.
Fair point, well made. All right then, Tony, what about you, mate? Do you think we've covered every angle on this?
Yeah, pretty much. Teleportation, no. The only thing we can teleport right now is a atom.
Yeah, and about 75% of a single atom at that. It's not even a whole one, is it?
Right. Don't we have like tremendous like energy constraints right now towards achieving anything close to that? And we're talking about an entire ship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm good on that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point.
Not just an entire ship, but a ship that is over 300 feet long and just over 36 feet wide.
What's the tonnage on it? Do we know? Do we know the tonnage on this ship? It had to be.
I think it's called. Is it called a destroyer escort? I can't remember what it's called now.
Yeah, it was an escort.
It's a Cannon-class destroyer escort as built when it was in service with the United States at full load. It was 1,620 long tons displacement.
Wow, there you go. I mean, that's a fairly enormous amount of steel that just upped and vanished in a pile of green smoke. And then it reappeared with people fused in the decks. A story that has never been corroborated by anyone ever, except possibly Star Trek. Right, okay. Poor Ponky, how about you? What do you reckon? Is there anything that we haven't got to yet?
So do you want to make conclusions or?
Well, I'm gonna touch back on people for conclusions as well. I mean, people have sort of given them so far. If you want to, by all means, do.
This is not a conclusion, but there is something we didn't quite touch on, which is the Varro edition of Morris's book. There he is. He's happened to come off at the right time.
Perfect time,
yeah.
baby.
The Varro edition, which is the original source. There it is. Yeah, for
there it is.
This stuff. If you go and read it, and you can get it online now, it's with the internet, like a lot of things, it's fairly easy to find. There's stuff about, you know, experiments with teleporting ships and stuff, but there's a lot of stuff written as if it's written by aliens and saying, yeah, they got this right, but they got that wrong, and, you know, that stuff gets really brushed to the side. It's very severely cherry-picked. Like, no one ever brings up the whole alien thing, but initially that was quite a big part of it. That the ship went and spoke to aliens.
Oh,
The
really?
The documentary I watched today on it featured the alien element heavily. That it would happen during the time of the big craze with the U.S. government and unidentified flying objects, so it was automatically tied to that sensationally.
It is a big part of it, but I think that aspect has sort of naturally evolved out of the conspiracy because it makes it sound like complete nonsense. You debunk it.
I think that's a good point. Well made. All right. Well, look, I think rather than do I have, let's just go straight to our conclusions. Right. We've looked at pretty much everything. Is there anything that hasn't been said that you would like to in terms of conclusion, Port Punky? What do you think this all boils down to in the end?
Oh, yeah. So the way I think about this is quite simple. If they had the ability to teleport or make invisible a ship of that size, even for a microsecond, even if they could do that, they wouldn't just leave that technology. That would be a thing still. Plus, it would be a lot easier to teleport something small or make something small invisible, right? This isn't how technology appears. You don't just suddenly invent something, apply it to a massive ship, and then go, hey, that kind of worked. Let's just never do that again. That's not how it works. It's just
They wouldn't be able to resist. Yeah, they would definitely murder that.
Humans are really, really good at mucking with things, and that would
It's kind of what we do.
Yeah. So from that angle, I just cannot buy that any of this happened.
No, I'm with you there. Look, let's turn
Cool story though, bro.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool
right,
story,
82
bro.
Productions. You've had a more limited time to look at all of this, but as a Navy man, you know a bit about degaussing anyway. So what do you think? Give us your final look at all this.
So there is definitely an easily misunderstood event that actually does take place regularly, especially for the subsurface fleet. There is actually a degaussing station not far away from where the ballistic missile submarine base in the Pacific Northwest is. So it is common for those types of boats whose the easiest way to describe their job is they go out and become a hole in the water. One of the ways you can detect a submerged submarine is using what's called the MAD, the magnetic anomaly detector. And one way to hide yourself from that detector as a submerged submarine is by making sure you are degaussed and as neutral on your exterior as possible before you go out on your deployment, because it does require an external apparatus to do it. Another benefit to it, and actually what they noticed from it, from the ships that they did it to, the surface ships they did it to, they noticed that when they came back and went through a pier side or even a dry dock maintenance period, they noticed that the ships that were degaussed did not have as much barnacle buildup and other corrosion on the submerged part of the hull. So that actually leading to another development where we've actually put sacrificial blocks of metal on the outside of the ship under the waterline to essentially force that polarity charge to go to those segments and then allow those portions to be eaten away through the deterioration of what would otherwise foul the entire hull and actually end up having the life of a steel-hulled ship last even longer through proper maintenance in addition to it. So there really are some touches with reality of this story that are phenomenal. But just like any game of telephone, you miss one detail early on and you end up with a wildly different story on the end. And I think that's where it comes down to that fallibility of the human mind to latch on to things that may not be true, but they sound interesting. And we are a very cerebral species. We overthink shit and we make stuff up when we instead of leaving it at, I don't know, let's come back to it later, or I don't know, let's try to find out, you're more often than not going to find that asshat who's going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to make this up because, you know what? It sounds cool. I think it's what it could be. I'm not sure, but you know what? If I say it confidently enough, someone's going to believe me, and who knows what I could get from it from there.
Yeah, do you know, I see that an awful lot. That's something that shares through quite a lot of conspiracy theories as well. I think, yep, excellent point, well made. I think the only person who I haven't talked to at the moment is Carissa Brock, isn't it? Carissa, have you got any final thoughts or conclusions that you'd like to get to?
Not really. I found it really interesting, and I love everything that ATT just said, because it also it blends in with, combine all of that happened with the experiments that were going on that were classified with the Manhattan Project and the atom bombs that were going on in Philadelphia as well. And you can see easily where the stories got melded and warped, and the game of telephone just went haywire.
Absolutely. Because that's what that is. It seems to me that's what this all boils down to ultimately, is that the Philadelphia experiment happened. There was a Philadelphia experiment. It actually happened, and it did make a ship disappear in a very specific sense. And as you've both pointed out now, this game of telephone has just exacerbated that to an extraordinary degree, especially when you consider people like Carlos Allende adding their slightly convoluted additions to this, where they've tied things up in a strange way. I mean, you can see where it's all bubbled up from, but ultimately it's just a case of real things that happen. Now, it's worth pointing out as well that the Philadelphia experiment, like the Manhattan Project, was extremely secret. It was highly top secret, right? So the fact that a certain amount of misinformation about the project had been put out wasn't something that the Americans were too concerned about, because it helped muddy the waters as to what was really going on. You know, it was an advantage. They were hiding from the Germans exactly what technologies they didn't have. To tell the Germans, oh, we've got a thing that makes our ships disappear, I mean, that's brilliant propaganda, isn't it? You just don't tell them that it happens to be magnetic, and it's a lot more simple and straightforward than it sounds. Look, that's my thoughts. I'm wondering if anyone has anything that they'd like to add before we basically say goodbye to the evening. Has anyone got anything they'd like to add? I'll turn to our guest as well. Have you got anything you'd like to put into the ring before we say goodbye?
I got a good comment from the live chat there. LRJ88. If you put your car keys on the table, close your eyes, count to 6,000 while singing, I can make your car go invisible.
I don't need 6,000. I need 30. Count to 30. And we good.
In, out, sorted. Nice point, well made. All right, look, I think we've covered. Sorry, go on.
I'd like to just put out one more reminder for the efforts to help TNT. The links have been in the chat. Anybody can share them anywhere they can. I'd appreciate it. We'd appreciate it. And thanks again for all your support.
Absolutely. For Punky.
Anacito said he doesn't need the keys. Anacito said I don't need the keys. My man.
You've got to be careful, man. You were giving that secret signal away. We'll get fired by our overlords. Be careful. Oh no, they're all doing it. Oh no. Right, quick, moving swiftly onwards. Look, I'll finish up the last one. I think it's time we say goodbye for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us on Going Critical. It's been a pleasure as always. By now, you know the drill. Comments or questions can go in the comments below, or you can send us an email to goingcriticalshow@gmail.com. I want to give a special thanks to AT2 Productions for lending our channel a bit of legitimacy for once, giving us some actual insight on what might be happening inside the experiments as part of the actually, that's something. Have you ever been part of any sort of experiment when you were with the Navy that was similar? Did you ever have to take part in something where you weren't really sure what this experiment was? They'd installed some new technology, or perhaps you can't tell us, I don't know.
No, don't ask you, man. You'll have to kill it.
We'd never know.
Now, the closest I ever got to something like that is in a way to essentially save the Navy some money and actually save ourselves some time and headache in the shop. Right when I got to my first permanent duty station in Jacksonville, Florida, I jumped on a team with a bunch of the other techs where we essentially rebuilt a specific system from the aircraft in the shop. So instead of having to test just one piece of gear on the supplied test kit and then go test it out in an aircraft on the flight line before we could sign it off, we made it to where we could do it all in a quarter to an eighth of the amount of time.
Wow.
They're in the shop in one go.
Oh man.
And it wasn't really anything classified. The most classified bit of that is some of the coding on some of the circuit boards in the piece of gear that we were testing, because it was part of the GPS navigation system.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. And there's certain things you certainly can't give away on the game there. Okay. Well, look, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I think now's probably the last chance for you to shill away for anything that you want to. So are there any final sort of bits of self-advertising, self-promotion, or whatever that you'd like, or some other channel that you'd like to point out before we say goodbye?
Oh, already gave a 1 minute debunkist time to go ahead and make sure that if you're here and you're subscribed and watching this and you're not subscribed to him already, what the hell are you waiting for? And also, for those who are curious about more of the things that I have going on in the background, especially with the nonprofit I am in the works of starting up, actually over on my channel, there are a couple open discussions on the channel from this past week. One that actually happened a couple hours before we went live here, where I did talk about that stuff and other items going on related to that. So feel free to go and have a look over there as well. And as with anything, if something comes up and you think, and it's associated with me, or if it's something you think I may know or be able to help you out with, get a hold of me. Bring me the questions. Who knows? You might end up giving us a good idea for a discussion to have either during a random open chat or during the VTW or Canar with Damar series. I mean, I love the interaction with the viewership out there because, let's face it, without them, we wouldn't be here doing this.
Absolutely. No, look, those are brilliant sentiments. All I can really do is echo them, and also remind you to get over to his channel if you haven't already. How could I say it better than that? I suppose what I better do now is point out that next week, what with it being Yuletide, we'll be looking into Santa Claus. So Father Christmas, Santa Claus, Saint Nick, whatever you call him, you absolutely don't want to miss that because it's going to be fantastic. That being said, I think it's time we all bid our farewell. So I'll wish you my final good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are. I've been Jim Bojo. We've been going critical. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from all of them.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Night night.